Hi there, we are carrying on with Luke chapter 4 and we are reading from verse 38. Jesus left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon. Now Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever and they asked Jesus to help her. So he bent over her and rebuked the fever and it left her. She got up at once and began to wait on them. When the sun was setting, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness, and laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Moreover, demons came out of many people, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak, because they knew he was the Christ. At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. The people were looking for him, and when they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. But he said, "I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns also, because that is why I was sent." And he kept on preaching in the synagogues of Judea. Okay, so there are a number of things in this passage. One of them is that healing for me has always been like one of those tricky things. I believe God heals. I pray for people to get healed and they typically don't get healed. I've got friends who have prayed for miraculous healings and seen them. People who are blind that can see again. People that are paralyzed in one leg and they get healed. So I believe it works. I will continue to pray for people as the opportunity comes up, and I will continue to pray, believing that it can happen, believing that God might make it happen, but I've never seen it happen. I'm okay with that for some reason, but it is quite challenging. But what's interesting here is Jesus bends over her, rebukes the fever, and it leaves her. Like there's this sense of just authority of he knows how to do this thing, and he knows it's going to listen to him, and he's just like, get out. You're done. So I like that. And she got up at once and began to wait on them, like give the poor lady a rest. She's been sick, she's healed, and it's like she starts serving them coffee. That's weird. Anyway, so this is where it gets interesting because people start bringing to Jesus all kinds of people with different diseases and stuff, various kinds of sickness, and laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Now this is very interesting because there's a lot of, like, people sometimes say Jesus didn't heal everyone. And the way I see it, the way I read the story, is that everybody that Jesus tried to heal was healed. Everyone Jesus prayed for was healed. There are times when Jesus says, I was in Jerusalem, I didn't heal all the people. And he talks about it being a lack of faith or something like that. But there's no case that we have of Jesus praying for someone to be healed and they're not healed. There's a space where Jesus is at the pool and there's a lot of sick people and he only heals one of them. And so I do believe that God can heal anyone all the time, and I don't believe that he does. I've had friends of mine have died that have not been healed from things that we were praying for God to heal them from. And I think that's one of the tensions of the gospel that we have to hold. We believe in a God that can do anything, but we believe in a God that sometimes doesn't, that sometimes lets kind of the sin of the world play its consequences, that lets natural kind of sickness, which is also part of the messed up world we're in, play its consequences. But people have looked at it and said, yeah, there were some people Jesus didn't heal. And that kind of seems to indicate that Jesus couldn't heal some people. Here we see that everybody that Jesus prayed for was healed. Laying his hands on each one, he healed them. And so I think it's significant. I think it's significant to see that God has this potential. And that every time that Jesus prayed for people, he healed them. We have another interaction with demons. We saw that in the last one we looked at. And the demons, it's so interesting that they come out shouting, "You are the Son of God." Like demons just had this real sense of who Jesus was. And it just made them like so fearful. He rebuked them, would not allow them to speak because they knew he was the Christ. Even the demons, like they knew the authority he had. So often the people around Jesus didn't get it. The teachers of the law, the religious leaders certainly didn't get it. And yet it's the demons, like the evil ones, that are like... In the last year, I found out this definition of something called an ambivert, which seems to describe what I am. Because I've always felt like a bit of an extrovert in terms of I like crowds, I like people, I like going off, I like attention. But then there are times when I just like to be alone, where I'm all peopled out and just being by myself is actually a good thing. And that maybe seems a bit like what Jesus was. Like he was definitely very extroverted. But there are many times when he goes away by himself, and often it's to pray, often it's just to connect with God, often it seems to get away from the crowds, or he preferred smaller groups and stuff like that. And so maybe there's the sense that Jesus was an ambivert as well, like a little bit of an extrovert, a little bit of an introvert, which I think is cool because it kind of says, like in a world that has tended to kind of uplift extroverts, it kind of shines a light on the fact that there are times for both. Actually, both are fine. But Jesus seemed to need times out of the spotlight. He seemed to need times out of the crowd. He seemed to need times to refuel, maybe, to reconnect with God, to listen to the Spirit, to see what is the Spirit doing, what's happening with the kingdom of God here. And there's a healthy lesson in that for us, that we need to take time out. We need to slow down. Even the biggest extroverts amongst us, even the biggest ambiverts amongst us. And I think the introverts already know that. It's time to just be alone with God, to be away from the crowds, to just be still. That's why I love that verse. Be still and know that I am God. Like, be still. First stop. Shut up. Be quiet. Slow down the noise in your head. Slow down the noise in the background. The noise of the screens. Just be still and know that I'm God. So Jesus did that. It took time to go to a solitary place, but the people came and found him. And they tried to keep him from leaving them, but he said, I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns, because that's why I was sent. The good news. One of the things with Christianity, often Christianity gets a bad rep. Christians hate gay people. Christians hate people who have abortions. There's like a lot of like bad rep for Christianity. But often, if we just take that phrase, the good news, is this thing that I'm preaching the good news? Is this thing that I'm living good news? Is my attitude good news? Good news to the poor? Good news to the marginalized? Good news to those pushed on the side? Because if it is, then there's a likelihood that it's connected to Jesus. If it isn't, then it's quite obvious. If this thing isn't good news to somebody, then it's really not good news at all. So that's something to keep in mind of. And then the last thing is, he kept on preaching in the synagogues of Judea. And that reminds me of kind of the Acts 2 church, is that Jesus spends time in the synagogues, in what we would call churches today, like the kind of church equivalent, in the religious places, in the religious gathering places. But we also saw here that he spent time in people's homes. We see that he spends time at dinner parties. We see that he spends time on the side of the mountains. So Jesus kind of didn't have, these are the religious spaces, those aren't the religious spaces. And it cuts through this whole divide of what is spiritual and what is secular. Because with Jesus, everything was spiritual. Everywhere he went, he was looking to spread the good news. He was looking to spread the kingdom of God. He was looking to bring healing and challenge and share the message of love. Everything was spiritual. There's no area of secular in Jesus' life like this area the spiritual doesn't have space in. It should be the same for us. Is Jesus in your money? Is Jesus part of your time? Is Jesus in your relationships? Every single aspect. Let's model the life that Jesus lived out in this, and let's do it out in the crowds, and let's also take time to just be alone, be still, know that he's God, recharge, reconnect, re-envision what the kingdom is about, and then go out and spread it some more.